All right, so now it's recording.
Basically says you can direct it.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
Is that a portable power supply?
What's that?
Portable power?
Oh, yeah, it's lithium.
Where do you want this?
Oh, yeah.
A battery?
Oh, that's, I kind of like this thingy here. I need a seat, though.
You want to do this over
Yeah, I
here?
need a chair.
Okay, so the chair and then the. Yeah, I'll get it.
I can move it if you like.
Yeah, just gonna sit on the top of it. Right next to it. So this is another one of our performance artists.
So, is there sound on this?
Yeah, there's definitely, I put up the sound.
Let's do this first, maybe. So this is actually a piece called DP, it's a little bit from, it's the aftermath of DP, Improvised Punk Opera, has elements of opera in it, mechanics of opera, there's singing and screaming and
Doesn't play?
yeah. So that's my band. His guitar was out for the night, he was dead, so we didn't hear anything. So let me introduce myself. I'm Sid Yiddish, and I wanted before. We're going to do this a little different. Jen's going to interview me, but I want to tell you a little bit first about my questions. I want to talk a little bit about my diagnosis. I have depression, anxiety. I'm also manic depressive, which I recently discovered. It's always a good one. And apparently, depression runs in my family from my father's side. So at least three or four of the children in our family has a form of depression or anxiety. Growing up was pretty difficult because I don't think we all understood what all this stuff was. My older brother used to call me a mental ape because he didn't understand me, and so that was his way of saying that I'm mentally ill. So I've been in and out of therapy since age 5, so it's not been a fun road. But although I've had depression all my life, I wasn't diagnosed till I was 40, and I seem to recall that it started getting worse around age 15 or 16, when I remember just screaming just uncontrollably if somebody pressed my buttons the wrong way or something, and I couldn't stop the screaming because I didn't understand what was going on. Later on, in my first career as a journalist, I lost a ton of jobs because I'd always butt heads with editors, because when you're manic, you're sort of, I don't know, maybe for me, you always want to be careful of what someone does to you. So I was always fighting. It looked like I was fighting, but I wasn't really fighting, so I was butt heads. I lost a ton of jobs that way. Never been hospitalized per se, because whenever it was suggested to me, I would just sort of like do this weird snap up out of it, and I said everything was fine. But I'd been a performer most of my life, and so it just sort of things kind of started spiraling out of control, I guess. Probably by about 40, they discovered it when my parents went away for the first time, and I just completely collapsed. And I was a proofreader at that time in a bingo factory.
What
In a bingo gaming factory.
Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah, that's why when you ever see the post about bingo, now you know. I had, I had missed like 10 errors in a row, and my supervisor called me in and she said, "What's wrong with you? You've missed 10 errors. How could you do this? You've never done this before." And I told her I had depression, and I just told her not to tell anybody because I was so afraid that I had another boss that just really would lay into me all the time, because right before the depression I was having blackouts, and they accused me of falling asleep, so I would get suspended a lot. And I remember the one time that I had the biggest blackout I'd had. Apparently what I'd heard was from somebody else, they had paraded a ton of witnesses in front of me all taking pictures and things like that, and brought it up to my supervisor. She didn't give me a second chance, and she said she suspended me for like 4 days. That kind of history happened throughout my life. I had a lot of people telling me depression was in my head, and just stuff like that. I guess that's the preamble.
So, Sid, what inspired you to create this performance, and how long did it take?
Well, I actually started writing poetry and notes to myself in 2000 when I was first diagnosed. I was actually misdiagnosed because of the symptoms I had at the time. I was misdiagnosed as being psychotic. I remember a psychiatrist asking me, "Do you hear voices in your head?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, sure, why not?" He asked me, "Well, where do you think they come from?" I said, "Oh, I don't know, outer space." And then boom, he handed me a package of Abilify. We had been on tour. I had been on tour at the time in Nashville, and we were in a hotel room, and I remember that night we saw a commercial about Abilify saying how it could ruin your liver, and I know liquor does that already. Not that I drink a lot, and I threw the Abilify away in the trash can, so I never touched it. But what inspired me to create this performance was I was in therapy at the time at the Family Institute at Northwestern University in Evanston, and I remember reading this letter to the editor from somebody who was anonymous, and saying that, you wear the stigma of depression on your head or on your forehead, and I'm sure a lot of people do that. I know I did for the longest time. So I the idea to create it was if I could help one person through their depression, that would be great. At least I would kind of had started working on my goal. Now how long it took, initially I wrote from 2000 to 2005, and I started performing them in various bits in clubs, and actually Beach Poets was another one I had done that, where they were called various things before they became what they were. There's one that's called, initially it was called 3U Me, which was basically just a lot of screaming and nobody understanding things. But while I was doing my performance art, I had a measuring stick, and I had 4 people hold it like at different angles, and I was measuring the amount of space that I could scream in by doing this thing that I had done. Yeah, so that's my inspiration. Okay.
How do you create your music for your performance?
Well, this is, for this particular performance, I have an improvisation for jazz band, and this one was a pretty difficult one. So I conduct using physical gestures, so that's how I make the music. So there's specific ones that they understand, like when I say dial, dial, dial in a loud tonal voice, that means just play your music crazy. If I do, let's see if I'll do it. If I do this one, yeah. So if I do this one, this means make a funny noise or scream or do whatever with your. There you go. Yeah. Okay. So that's another one. So that's another one.
Good job.
There's another one. So I've got about 75 gestures within the realm of what I created over a 3-year period. And that's how I make the music, because I can't read music. So, ask me the next question.
So this performance was previously performed in a different country with a more structured band. When your band became involved with the process of this performance, how did that process change? Was it easier or more of a challenge?
Boy.
It's hard to do that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me ask that, Jen. So the way this started was, so I met this band called Clean Boys. I met them through YouTube. They were looking for a video of a mutual friend of ours, and they couldn't find anything by him, so they typed in his name, and they came across one of my videos, a throat singing video of his. I was throat singing a name. I have a name for the name of the piece is called Michael Board Weasel Squeezer, and we had just kind of connected up, and the next year we started kind of like we started working through Chicago Calling, which is basically, I think that's run by Dan Godston still, or was at the time, I think it still is. But it was basically, you're in Chicago and you need to use somebody outside of Chicago to collaborate with you. So they had done it the first year, and then the second year we had done it. We started doing this, we started doing the opera. It was kind of difficult. It was kind of difficult in a way, but I allowed them, I just gave them free rein, and they scored it. And I just did the text bits and stuff. We were doing it for a while. We did it for about a year, and they said, well, hey, why don't you come on over to Denmark? And I said, well, not until we have a record. So we recorded one night, February 7, 2010. It was midnight where I was, and it was 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning in Denmark. That's pretty difficult considering they stayed up all night, they were drinking. So we recorded it through Skype. When they came, they were my backing band through Skype. That's pretty much what they were at that point. We went on, and then finally, so it was mixed and stuff, and then it was released over there. I flew to Denmark. We toured for about 2.5 weeks. I was doing, we had about 6 to 8 dates, and I guess it was kind of really methodical, and to kind of continue to keep doing this thing over and over and over and over. And not that I was sick of it, but just, it was, other things were going on, and I would, at some points, I would break down and cry because I didn't want to do this, and it was really difficult to keep reliving what I was going through. This piece, I mean, this piece was just really hard to keep doing it, but I always had this thing in the back of my head. It was something I always heard from my mom. My mom I think my mom's way of protecting me or something, because she didn't want to, I don't want to say that she was in denial at all. I would never blame my mom or my dad. But my mom would always say that you're stronger than you are. And so that's what kept me going. That's what stitched me together the whole time. So that's what kind of kept me going. We toured and stuff, and then I came home, and then this sort of I don't want to say it was kind of dormant up until recently when actually when Gretchen asked me to contribute something, and I realized I had to rewrite everything, and because that had been about 10 years, literally. I was also doing it with my band, the Candy Store Henchmen. Now telling an improvisation band how to do things with a bunch of seasoned musicians, boy, that was the most difficult thing you could ever imagine. Especially telling them, like, because there's a language part. So in the fourth part, which you saw, Gretchen, it was all language. So like when I had to explain to them, we had several rehearsals. I don't know if the rehearsals did it justice or not, but as close as I could get it. We did probably about 5 to 6 rehearsals, or takes, or whatever, however we're going to call it. And so they didn't understand what it means. Oh, just speak another language. What? Oh, just speak another language like French or Spanish or, oh, I don't know French or Spanish. So I said, well, just do Pig Latin. Pig Latin sound like a garbled tape. Do whatever you feel, you know. Just don't compete with me, you know. So I won't like be thrown off or whatever. But of course that didn't happen because it did happen that way. They threw me off completely. But that's okay. That's just ornamentation that adds to the performance itself. And it was really difficult to kind of get it through to them that this was really important. I don't know, it needs a lot of work, I think, still. We added some new elements to it. There's a bit in here where I sing off key, and that's a tango. This is something I'd written early on. It was originally the piece, but I took it out for time constraints, but I just decided to add it back in and stuff. But I think overall it was okay in general. They always told me in grad school, oh, it's always a work in progress. So, ask me another question.
Why do you call this an opera?
Well, okay, again, so it's got all the mechanics of an opera. There's a lot of screaming and it is screaming and singing and not necessarily bloody murder, you know, but a lot of singing and screaming, and it's got all the other mechanics like it tells a story and stuff like that. I think that's what an opera does. I think that's what it does. How's the time?
We're around 9. We could be wrapping up at some point.
Okay, yeah, well, tell me what,
Okay.
tell me how much time I've got.
Well, it would be good if we could finish up around 9:15.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
right, okay. Ask me another question.
Okay. Who inspires you in your work and your art practice?
I'd say all the people that I've worked with over time. My dad, weirdly enough, because he's the one that gave us the gift of depression. I say that because there were a lot of things that happened in the 70s that he went through, and I didn't find out up until maybe shortly before he developed dementia, and I wasn't really able to talk to him as much anymore. I'm really inspired by the world and by, I know that's just like a, I don't know, it sounds like a generalization, it's not. I've always said that my wife is the universe, and it means I'm married to everybody who's around me. And even bingo cards, that's a term in bingo, by the way. It's when you put cards together, it's, you marry them when you put them together, you glue them together, they're married. I guess I'm really inspired by just people around me, like my family, my mom, my dad, my friends who are artists. Because I mean, a celebrity is a celebrity. You put your pants on the same way that they do, and they pick their nose the same way you do. So I know it's weird logic, but it's a bad analogy, but that's what I think or do. If it sounds disjointed, I'm sorry. I'll try to explain it to you if you ask me later, or if you don't want to, you don't have to. It's okay too.
Should I ask one last question?
Yes, one last.
Okay. When did you realize that becoming an artist was to be your way of life?
Probably when I was a journalist. And I used to, like, on the side, I would write poems at budget meetings that I absolutely hated. And they'd always, or I'd be like at work waiting to use the computer, because back in those days where I worked one place in particular, I'm thinking, we used to work with those Apple computers, those ones that you now use as doorstops, you know, those square ones. And if something was wrong and there'd be a line down the middle, that means you had to wait. In this office where I worked at Des Plaines Journal, and I used to have desks that were drawers, and they'd use 2x4s for the desk. It's a great thing, so in case the computer went over, oh well. So that's when I kind of knew. I mean, I started really, because I never, it's through my journalism years, I guess I would say, it's probably the later, as I went along later, because the three things I wanted to be when I grew up had nothing to do with art. I wanted to be a fireman, wanted to be a baseball player, and I wanted to be president. I'm working on that one. Anyway, I think that's it. I hope I did okay.
Yeah.